Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We just had a great segment with Ryan Kelly in the previous part of the show. We talked all about what to do if you're just getting started on this process now. So if this is the first thing that you're encountering and you have not started the process, pause this now, go on back to that first segment and listen to what Ryan and I had to say about getting started even after November 1st. What we're going to do today in this segment is talk a little bit about a school in University of Southern California that has a priority deadline coming up on December 1st. Ryan talked about what priority deadlines are in our prior segment, but for all intents and purposes, I think I really treat USC as having a December 1st deadline for the students that are applying there. And my guest, Mary Sue Youn, is nodding her head here on the video portion of the segment because she is in agreement with me. But Mary Sue, it's great to have you here on the show today.
Thanks, Ian.
So you have a lot of students, like I do, who are interested in engineering programs. And we both really like the engineering prompts with the Viterbi School of Engineering at the University of Southern California. We are going to talk about those in a moment, but I'll give that as a little carrot for everyone. What I want to do initially is come back to the initial USC prompts, the ones that everybody has to answer. There are three options here that students need to choose one to respond to. And we can talk about what those options are. I'm loath often to want to just read out loud on the show. But do you gravitate towards any of these three options for students that are looking at USC? Is there a best choice for a student as they're thinking about their supplemental essay family?
As with many things in college admissions, it depends. So
okay. Yeah.
I feel like it really, I look at this as kind of when I work with a student through several supplements within a supplemental part of the application, I look and see how those fit with their main essay and sort of are the chapters of the book all fitting together. And so it kind of depends on what their main essay is about. Does something in those ABC choices add something to that? And add to the layers of their application. So there's not one that kind of stands out that sort of works for everyone or the magic one that I would say to pick, but it really depends on sort of where your strengths lie and how to put forward those strengths.
Yeah, and so I would just briefly call these. Option A is essentially a diversity essay, or you're challenged by an idea or belief and the significance of that experience. The second essay is something that's interesting to you that you're going to talk about. So, and that's outside of your intended academic focus. And then the third is, what is something about yourself that is essential to understanding you? Now, that one is really, really open-ended. And I feel like that is a dangerous potential prompt because there isn't a whole lot of guidance to it. What is something about yourself that is essential to understanding you? And as you mentioned, the personal essay has already been written by this point. So how does a student think about this question of an essential piece? Is there a category that they should be looking to? Is it an extracurricular activity? Is it an interest they have? What do you advise students who are thinking about this particular prompt?
Yeah, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit in saying that I don't think that there's a perfect prompt, but I would say that this third one, the one of, sort of what do you uniquely bring, is probably the least used and probably the least helpful of the three. In a lot of cases I found, because students will tend to go back to things that lots of people could say, I'm a good friend, I'm a hard worker, those kinds of things come up a lot. And it's like, well, probably most of the USC applicant pool could say that. However, for the right student, if you truly have something that you feel like is not brought up in the rest of your application and sort of here's a space to talk about it, then that could be really impactful and really a wonderful part of their total USC application. But I would say that this one is sort of the one that it's the misdirection is, it's so broad that it's kind of like the tell me about yourself interview question, which I hate, I could tell you lots of things about myself. What's important? So if there's something unique that you feel like really hasn't been captured elsewhere, then that might be the prompt for you. But in most cases, there's not something in that space.
Yeah, I think with this, if you have an initial reaction to that question where you're like, I know what I'm going to write about here, then you should probably do it. But if you have to sit and brainstorm, what the answer to this question is, it's probably not for you. So, you've got to have within the first 30 seconds to a minute, yes, there's something I want to talk about. Thank goodness this question exists because I wanted to share this initially. So I think that's a key kind of device that you can use to figure out whether option C is going to be right for you. I also want to I think option A is one that we've talked about a lot in different contexts, which is, you've got a challenge from a different point of view. A lot of students, I think, probably have something that they've already written for the University of Washington or University of Oregon or some other school that asks a similar kind of question and can repurpose it into this USC prompt. And so I don't want to belabor that particular question here, but I am interested in the option B, which is describing something outside of your intended academic focus about which you are interested in learning. And it's got this framing that focuses on interdisciplinary study. Yep. And so how would you guide students to think about how to respond to this question? Does it need to be academic in nature? Is it just sort of an open curiosity? What kind of direction do students get from you?
So I see that one, that interdisciplinary word is holding a lot of weight in that question.
Yeah.
It's not really a space to talk about, I'm interested in engineering and specifically aerospace engineering. Those are really, it's like, that's a finer gradient of a bigger thing. But if it's sort of, I want to be pre-med, but I also love literature and I'm a fantastic creative writer. That would, I think, answer that prompt pretty well, because you're sort of talking about sort of two pretty different interests that don't necessarily intersect always. And so I think that interdisciplinary part of that question is really asking you to sort of push beyond the main thing that you've talked about and sort of say something that is perhaps on another side of the many academic options, another part of the range, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I like that. Another part of the range is a good way of thinking about that. Do you think that students here have to bring hard evidence, specific things about a particular area they're interested? Do they have to have sort of come to the table with an idea about what that thing is? Or can they just say, I've always wanted to learn about psychology. The brain is a really interesting thing, and I want to look at that. Like, what's the level of on the spectrum between like, I might be interested in this, or I am really interested in this, and I'm glad that USC lets me study other subject areas?
I don't think it has to be fully formed and, to the point where you're saying that specific, here's precisely how I would study that at USC. That's not what this question is asking for. Right. But I do think a little more than an idle curiosity that I just came up with 10 minutes ago. So
yeah, I looked at the list of other majors and I think this one maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Like, I was scrolling through your list of majors and I've never heard of.
Yeah.
No, that's probably a little too shallow of an exploration. But if it's something that you've at least explored a little bit, or maybe taken a class in, or had some exposure to that area in some way, then I think that works.
And I think here, if you think about a teacher who is really excited about a particular subject and you like the teacher, even if you didn't love the content, that might help point you in a particular direction to say, I'd love to learn more about this, because university professors are really great at instruction and they tend to be experts in their space. And so you might find a whole world that opens up based on that little nugget that you got in high school. The second thing, so there are three options for this first question, and you can do whatever you want in terms of those three options, but everybody has to answer the why do you want to come to USC, essentially. But this is an academically focused question. Describe how you plan to pursue your academic interests and why you want to explore them at USC. And then they also say you can address your first and second choice major selections. Do you think students should be explicit about carving out those first and second choice major selections, or is that an option for this essay?
Well, I think, they are putting the right above where this space is in the application. They're putting what those first and second choice major options are. And so I think this is a space to be specific to USC. It is a space to say, here's how my academic interests can be best served at USC. Here's classes I would take. Here's a lab I'd like to join. Here's a professor that I'd really like to have as my mentor. that's the level of detail that we would want to see. And, that's a USC take on it. But I would say that any of those, why do you like this academic thing at our college kind of essay is going to be, I would advise to answer this way is, pick out specific things about that college and those features that you really love that are uniquely served at that school.
Probably not a place for football. We're talking about tailgating or other aspects of Southern California life. This is intended to be purely academic, and they ask about that explicitly. I also think that because you're mentioning, a lot of students, I think, make the mistake of coming up with a template here and then just copying and pasting. And you want to work smart. We always talk about working smart as opposed to just working hard for its own sake. But man, that essay should not read like it's a template where there was a copy and paste that happened. It has to read like it was written originally for USC, even if you are borrowing some words and phrases from other schools.
Yeah, the way I always describe it to students is, your interest in chemistry is not going to change from college to college. So those couple lines about how you became interested in chemistry, that can move from a supplement to supplement.
Yeah.
But why you want to study chemistry at this particular college has to be unique to that school, their approach. And yes, especially for students who have long lists of colleges and sort of roll their eyes at me at this, it takes research. You can't just kind of, they sort of like, can't I just copy and paste? This is like my 20th supplement I'm doing. It's November, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, you can't. Yeah, you have to look at sort of what about this particular school's approach is appealing to you. And
sounds like you've met my students as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of them. Yeah. The research is key. I don't think it can be understated. Like, you really need to take some time to get to know each school you're applying to. We've said that on the show many times, but I think that's huge. We are going to kind of skip over. There are some questions for students who are gap year students. There are some specific supplements that students have to respond to if they are applying to the Dornsife College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, which is kind of an honors college within USC. And then there are these short answer questions. Respond to the following in 100 characters or less. Things like, what is your favorite snack? What TV show will you binge watch next? If you could teach a class on any topic, what would it be? What's the role of these in the USC admission process, and how seriously should students take their responses here?
They're just fun. I mean, admissions officers are tired. It's kind of like it's like a little sorbet in between the heavier essays. So I think it can be very fun. It can be pretty lighthearted. That said, you probably don't want all your answers to be sort of off the cuff fun. My favorite, this is TikTok, and it has to have you can have something funny, and you can have some stuff that's legitimately your favorite website can be something that is something, more teen appropriate, and something else that is kind of a mix. But I would say that, I've had students who really, really overthink this and say oh, my favorite book is this, great book of philosophy by,
that's nobody's favorite book.
No, it is not. Nope. So we can see through that. I think it doesn't really, these short takes don't really have a big impact in the admissions process. It's just, again, the sorbet in between the essays.
You don't want your reader to get offended, and you don't want them rolling their eyes. I think anything else, I think is pretty solid here.
Yep.
But let's talk about the engineering school at Supplements, because you and I both really like these. And I think I don't want to speak for you, but I like we see so many different engineering essays, and we have so many students who are interested in engineering who apply in with similar kinds of content. And I think USC is really asking questions here that are trying to get students to respond in different ways, to think about engineering in a different kind of way. And I guess I'll just open the floor to you. Is there anything that you look at with these two prompts that you get really excited by, or that you find generates a different thought process in your students?
So I'll skip over the first one for a second, but we should come back to it. But the second one about the grand challenges, I love, because I actually last year had a student who read through all the grand challenges and said, I don't think I really want to be an engineer because none of these excite me. And I was actually thrilled thrilled at that response because
Yeah.
I was like, if you can't see something in these 14 pretty broad sort of world issue problems
Mhm.
that you think has an engineering relationship to you, and the kid was already on the fence about engineering as it was, and I was like, to me, that's a win. You've learned something about yourself. But many students look at these and they really gravitate towards, cybersecurity or making better medicines or, carbon offsets and those kind of things. Whatever it is that you read in those grand challenges that you're like, oh yeah, that's the thing that I would really innovate and design around as an engineer, go for it. There's not a right or a wrong type of challenge. And most of my students who really do like engineering get very excited by one of them or a couple of them, and are like excited to dig in.
Yeah, no, I think they're great. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, if you just go to engineeringchallenges.org, you'll see a list of all 14 of them here. And there are things like, advanced personalized learning and advanced health informatics, restore and improve urban infrastructure. These are really specific engineering challenges. And I love that USC is essentially saying, they're basically saying, are you sure you want to be an engineer? And I think that that's great. And I love the way that it gets students having to think about, outside of what their typical kind of response is for what they want to do with engineering. They can't just say, I want to do AI and machine learning and see what happens in the computer science space. They've got to look at these grand challenges and really apply them. And I think that that's a really genius stroke by the USC admission office to try and get students thinking outside of the box there.
Yep.
How much research should a student do if they pick one of those challenges that they gravitate towards? How much research should they do to be able to understand that content? Does this need to be a well-researched essay? Is this something that's more personal? Yeah. What's the balance there?
So many engineers are quite literal. I live with two in my home. Yeah. So I always go back to, it's not a research paper about this engineering problem. You're not looking to solve this in the short space that you have. And so that's not really a space to kind of say, here's my answer to it, but it's sort of, why are you attracted with it? What would be attracted to it? What would be your approach to this problem? I don't think it's that you need to, solve climate change in your short answer.
No, and if you do that, then you'll get into USC. So, that's perfectly fine, but probably not something you want to take on here in mid-November. So have fun with that one.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. I think if you are an engineering mind, you're going to like looking at those and choosing from them. Now, the other question I think is really interesting as well, because the main crux of it is describe how your contributions to the USC Viterbi student body may be distinct from others. And they say, please feel free to touch on any part of your background, traits, skills, experiences, challenge, or personality to help us better understand you. Now, this is hard because you don't know who else is going to be in that class. And so how would you know what makes you distinct from the other students who are coming into USC? What should students do to think about their differences within the context of this USC pool, given that they can't see the entire pool?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this is a space to kind of think about the role that you have played in any kind of collaborative group. It can also be, because it specifically calls out sort of background and sort of life experiences, a place to talk about underrepresentation in engineering. And so if you feel like you are part of an underrepresented group, whether that be due to, race, ethnicity, religion, neurodiversity, those are things that you could talk about here, but not everybody has that as appropriate or has those things that they want to talk about in their essay. So I think of it as, if you are on your robotics team or your science Olympiad team, what's the role that you play within that group? If you're not sure, text a couple of your friends, ask them are you the guy who's walking around with the clipboard and checking everything off on the to-do list for that day for your team? Are you the person who comes up with a new technological idea of design? So thinking about it from that perspective might help you clarify your own role as it's being seen by those around you.
I think that's great. You really can own your strengths, I think, in that context. And it's a great way to identify not just an answer to this question, but also what differentiates you when you get into those collaborative spaces as an engineer. And keep in mind, if you're writing these Viterbi responses, you also are writing the other USC prompts. And so you don't want to write about the thing that's essential to understanding you being how you walk around with the clipboard during robotics, because you're going to write about that for
Right.
the Viterbi piece as well.
Right.
These are great essay questions. I really, really like them. Thank you for coming on the show, Mary Sue, and helping to unpack them, because they're really a lot of fun.
All right. Thanks, Ian.
You're welcome. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about late starts on the financial aid process. So stick around. You don't want to miss it.